and welcome to part 70 in my build log series of the Trumpeter 1:200 scale model of the Titanic. Now, today is a very short video because, well, I haven't done very much modelling this week, but what I am going to show is my replacement of the Hawse Pipe right at the very front of the ship. I have taken off the old one from Trumpeter and I have fitted the new China 3D printed one instead. So, over the course of the video I will show the surgery to cut out the old one, fit the new one in place, glue it in place, sand it, fill it, all of that kind of stuff, and then also to paint it, to blend it in with the rest of the hull to make it look like it's always been there. So, without any further ado, let's crack on. So I have now decided to fit the China 3D Hawse Pipe, and as you can see I've done some preparatory work, so I've cut it out from the support material. I've taken a bit of a leaf from the Rolling Stones and painted it black, and I've also painted the inside in anti-fouling red, although it's quite difficult to pick out from here. I've also trimmed off the two nubs either side. There were sort of sections of the keel that went either side of this, and I've cut those off because I think that will make the surgery easier. I may be proved wrong on that, but I don't know, I just sort of feel like having to fit two fairly long, thin bits of plastic into the already fairly tricky hole that I'm going to have to cut might have been a bit more tricky, so I've cut those off. Time will tell whether that is a wise move or not, but we'll see. So the next job is to do the surgery on the actual hull. So as you can see, here is the Hawse Pipe as it came off the printer, and you can see those two long sections of keel plate, or stem as it's known, that sort of go either side of the Hawse Pipe. Those are the bits that I've cut off, because as I say, I just think it'll be a lot harder to fit that part in place with those bits connected up, so they've been cut off. It's worth saying now as well that in an ideal world I would not be doing this fit once I'd already painted the hull and once I'd already got quite a long way along with the detail. Ideally, this would be a far better and easier job to do before you paint the hull. So, you know, you cut off the mould lines and you perhaps add a few little bits of detail here, you drill out some portholes, and then you also fit any other bits and bobs that you want to your hull. It would be much more logical to do it then. Now, obviously for me, I didn't have that option because these parts weren't around before I painted my hull. But just, you know, if you're looking for a logical order to do things, it's much better to do this early on before your hull becomes nicely decorated and painted, because you're much less likely to cause damage to it then. Now, this is one of the reasons why it's actually very useful to be able to remove your decks swiftly, because just by the removal of 3 screws, one right at the bow and 2 at the aft of the well deck, I can simply lift off the entirety of this deck, and then I've exposed the end, which takes away all the delicate stuff ready for the sawing into the Hawse Pipe. So what I've done to start with is using my Tamiya Saw, I have cut 2 lines straight into the hull for the exact height of the Hawse Pipe. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut across and down and remove the old one, and what I'm hoping is that that clears a large enough aperture to get the new Hawse Pipe in. Then it's a case of just filling and sanding and filling and sanding, but we'll see how we go. If that doesn't create enough of an aperture, I'll have to remove more material and carry on. But what I'm really trying to do here is remove as little material as possible. Right, I am using a hot knife here to try to remove the old Hawse Pipe. A couple of things to be aware of with the hot knife is, firstly, it's hot, so don't burn yourself. The second thing is, do be careful, because the hot knife melts through the plastic, but then it does cool, so if you're not careful you can end up sort of sticking your knife into the plastic and sort of gluing it in place. So be sort of swift with your cuts. You see, I'm not keeping my knife in there very long. I'm putting it in, cutting for 1.5 seconds, then removing it and going again, because you run the risk of having your knife glued into position. See, I'm now pulling it out, working it out, there we go. And we are making relatively steady progress. Each time we make a cut, we're getting about 1 millimetre through. We've got about 10 mil to do, so that's 10 cuts or so that we need to remove this part. We're not far off there, actually. Not far off at all. There we go. Lovely. So as you can see, old Hawse pipe is removed. Now let's see what sort of aperture we have created. So here's a still image, and as you can see it does look pretty ugly at the moment, but the next step is to drill into that so that we clear enough space behind for the 3D printed Hawse pipe to fit in place. Okay, what I've done is I've sanded away the last vestiges of the Hawse pipe so that now the bow just flows nicely either side. I may well need to do more. It's very difficult to work out just how the plastic actually does sit when it's not all the same colour. It's far easier to do it when it's all one colour and those sort of fine little lines stand out a bit more. I've also drilled a hole exactly where I want the Hawse pipe to go, and that hole is the maximum width of the new Hawse pipe. So I now need to fill out this hole a bit more with some microfiles until I can slot this into that aperture, glue it in place, and then it's a case of just sanding and filling until I get a nice finish. So you can see we're now not far off having a hole that's the right shape. Just a question of opening it out a bit more. Right, here we go, and you can see that I have cut a hole and the new Hawse pipe fits in. And what's lovely, it's quite a snug fit, and that is exactly what I want, because it being a snug fit means that I have quite a lot of control over its location. You know, I can sort of manipulate it, move it around until I'm absolutely happy with it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a look at some photos of Titanic. I'm going to get the camera back in focus. I'm going to look at some photos of Titanic, make sure the Hawse pipe is in the correct position, and then I'll glue it in place. And then it's a case of filling the area with filler, that kind of thing, and then sanding, smoothing. What I'll probably have to do is sand it, smooth it, paint it, see if it's smooth enough. Probably won't be. Sand a bit more, so on and so on and so on. But so far, so good. It does already look a little bit better than the previous one, I think. So I've been studying some photos. This one in particular is very helpful. And I'm pretty happy I've got it in the right place now. You can see that it lines up perfectly with the stem, which is what we want. It's got that slight downwards angle to it. The Hawse pipe wasn't completely straight. It sort of comes in at an angle. And of course, it's aligned horizontally and vertically as well. So, pretty happy with that. We're going to glue this in place now, and then we'll start filling. Right, so our putty has dried, and first things first, happy to say it fits perfectly with the stem of the ship, so that's spot on. The next thing now is just to sort of work around this, sand it down, get it smooth, but also just make sure that the lines are as we expect. So, for example, this little bit of hull plating, make sure that that's replicated into the putty and so on, you know, things like that. Right, now this looks now and feels quite smooth, but the only real way of telling for sure is to paint over this and then see what it looks like. So that's what we'll do now. Right, as you can see, I do now have the Hawse pipe in place, and I've painted over, and the effect is pretty good. It blends pretty well into the model. I should just interrupt myself at this point to say that this is about 4 or 5 lots worth of adding filler, letting it dry, sanding it, smoothing it, painting it, sanding it down again, adding a bit more filler, sanding it, smoothing it, painting it, so on and so on and so on. This did take a fairly long amount of time because
everything looks smooth when it's all different colours, but when you paint it with the flat colour, it really does show any imperfections. So this has taken a fairly long time to blend the Hawse pipe in to the hull. But that doesn't make very interesting viewing, so I haven't really shown it, but do just bear in mind that this wasn't a one-shot job. This was a few iterations of adding filler and sanding it and so on. But what you probably can also see is that this black paint that I've gone over the area in, it's just a bit too pure, and certainly all the area surrounding it is a little bit off black. And that's because about 2 years ago I washed it with a solution which is made up of predominantly paint thinners, but then a small amount of very deep blue and a small amount of white. And what that does is it just tones the sort of the deep black down, and it turns it into a bit more of a sort of steely grey kind of colour. So that's what I need to do now on this section. And I also need to do it on the very stern section where I did the stern plating a while ago, because I've not got around to doing it there yet either. So, to apply this stuff, use a rag or some sort of material. Don't use tissue paper or stuff like that, or toilet paper, because it will leave they'll leave fibres behind. So I'm using this stuff, and in the UK we call this J cloth, but it is just a sort of cleaning cloth really. And I'll just apply that wash over all the areas that I have painted recently. And this will take a bit of building up, you know, it won't look great to start with. And then as you go on and build up the layers of this stuff, it will start to look more like it's blended in, you know. So here's the bow hawser in place now with a little bit of the wash, not quite dried, but starting to blend into the model a wee bit more. Right, as we can see, the Hawse pipe now in place, and I'm very happy with it. It is a big improvement over the old one. There's a little bit more work to be done blending the paint into the other paint, but you know, be able to get onto that. But very happy with this. Much more realistic look for the bow of the ship now than we had before. And as with the Hawse pipe, if we move further aft, we'll get to the stern plating, which you'll remember I did a while ago, but I never applied this same matte wash effect. So this always looked a little bit too plain matte black for me. And you can see that now the effect is done, it does look significantly more realistic. I think matte black, like with a lot of sort of paint and model scale, if it looks too perfect, it just ends up making the model look like a model. And of course the aim here is to make the model look like a real ship, and just giving that little bit of distress, that it just takes it away from being pure matte black, and it makes it look a little bit more like plates of steel and iron that have been painted in black, but they've got that little bit of weathering, that little bit of distress that comes with being in proximity to the sea for a year and a half or whatever, and it does just make that model look a little bit more realistic really. So there you go. That is the end of the video. As I say, quick video today, but hopefully that has shown you something. And here is a photo of the Hawse pipe fitted onto the model, and then also a photo of Titanic and her real Hawse pipe there as well. So, if you've enjoyed this, do please like and subscribe. If you've got any questions or comments, pop them down below, and I'll do my absolute best to get back to you. And I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.